Delighted to welcome James Meek to host this evening, where you're going to be in conversation with Houghton talking about your shared interest in reporting from Afghanistan. James, you set your last novel, We're Now Beginning Our Descent in Afghanistan. I know you've reported from there, but why did you set it there?
I have always been interested in that place. In fact, I wrote my very first novel when I was 18. It was never published, thank goodness, because it was terrible, but it was a full-length book, and you know, it had all the appearances of a novel, characters, plot and everything. Naturally, I knew absolutely nothing about Afghanistan except what I'd seen on the news, but I still wrote it, and I think that was a mark of a fascination with a place that seemed to be beyond all the roads, all the highways, that seemed to be just to the end of the road and then some. And I must say, when I first went there, immediately after the attack on New York in 9/11, the manner of my arrival was very much did very much correspond to that image, because it was a very difficult journey. You couldn't go directly. It took days to get to where I was trying to get to. A very long, difficult overland journey. So my anticipation was actually met, and then some. It was the impact of the place on my senses was very extreme. I mean, I have often thought about Afghanistan in terms of what it's like to be a photographer there, although I'm not a photographer myself, and I have no talents in that area. But I've often felt that if you were a photographer, you could almost put on a blindfold and walk out of your room with a camera, just take random shots. It's so different, both in the rawness of the primal nature that you have there, the extremity of the landscape, and also the way that relics and vestiges and echoes of modernity, whether it's bits of old Soviet tank or some soft drinks can, the way that these have just been transmuted into this strange environment. So I was already interested in it, and my interest was intensified by the visit. So it seemed like a good setting for. There were also story reasons why I wanted it to be there, but I felt, having been there, I had some kind of claim on it, however slight.
Yeah, well, it's certainly its significance hasn't diminished as an area of interest in recent times, has it? So, the other question I wanted to ask you, to jump around slightly, but you say you have no talents in the photographic area. However, you have produced, which is unusual for an established author and award-winning journalist, but you did dabble. You created a photo text which was published in Prospect magazine, trying to deal with the current economic situation. Why? That was an unusual decision. Why did you do that?
I think dabble is a fair word. It was an experiment. I wanted to see if I could make a photo story. I certainly have no talent in drawing. I've always been interested in not so much the American style of comic book as the French style, the bande dessinée, as they call them there. And I wondered if I could knit together a set of images into a story. And sometimes the pictures would be suggested by the story, but at other times it would simply be the pictures I happen to have. Could I take a relatively arbitrary set of not particularly exciting images and put them together into a story? And I do like the idea of constraints, of not being able to do absolutely everything, of feeling yourself in a kind of tight road and trying to maneuver in that. And it was a good discipline. I think it worked out better than I thought. I had the use, again, quite arbitrarily, of a piece of software which enabled me to put this story together, and I modified the pictures so that they looked more as if they had been drawn just using Photoshop, and the result could have been a lot worse, but I think it was an experiment. What I learned was that this could be done. You could tell a story, but that there were extreme limits to what you could do unless you started going down more towards the road of making something like a film. In other words, that you actually got, if not actors, then at least models to pose as people. I mean, it just does underline that drama and narrative really is about human beings, and if you try to make a story without showing a full face, which is what this one was. I mean, you had bits of faces, you had people's from the back. If you try to do that, then you are limiting yourself perhaps more than is sufficient to make a good story. So I would see it as a stepping stone, even though I think it went quite well.
Would it interest you to collaborate with a photographer to make a photo text
Yes,
in the manner of
and I have thought about that before. So
Mm.
of course, once your mind goes down that road, you think, well, hang on a minute, I've got a camera, I've got a photographer, I've got models. What does that remind me of? I mean, why not make a film, really? You would have to sit down and make a decision. Am I going to get more out of this by telling a story in these images? Is that a worthy form in itself? Or should I just go that little extra bit and actually make a film? I don't know, I haven't decided it yet.
Well, watch this space. Thanks very much.
Thank you.